being conservative, and possibly, if you want to do wall feeding in one night, maybe thaw and warm up a few less than you need. So say you have 10 snakes, maybe do 8 rodents. That way you can work through it, and then if you have 1 or 2 that don't eat, you're not wasting anything, and you could go ahead and either thaw out 1 or 2 more that evening, or wait till the next evening to feed the other 2 snakes. You know, basically what it is, and if you're a pet owner or an animal lover, you know, this is life. You are taking life to feed something else, and wasting, unfortunately, if we all do our part to not waste, we save a lot of lives that way, we save a lot of money that way, we save a lot of things. You know, let's just say there's 100,000 snake owners out there. If they do 1 extra rodent by accident and throw it away, it's 100,000 rodents that had to give their life for no reason. It's just something to think about. It, you know, on a small scale, it doesn't seem that big of a deal. You know, if you have something where you end up not using 1 and you have to throw it out or whatever, you know, it maybe doesn't seem that big of a deal. But in this big scope of things, with everybody across the United States and across the world doing it, and if we all try to be a little more conscious in how we do it, why not? You know, it saves a lot of things. Another thing is, you know, feeding live, if you're an animal lover, is tough. Rats in particular are pretty nice animals when you get to know them. They're friendly, they're very smart, you can train them, they're, you know, they show affection, you know, and anything like that that you can physically see, you know, excitement, happiness, fear, is tough. You know, if you throw, just say, a small rodent into the snake's cage, and, you know, you can see that rodent terrified that, you know, I'm going to die. It's something, you know, as a human being and as an animal person, that is tough. So that's why I say, if you are not able to do that, then maybe owning a snake is not the best choice for you. And I'll show you in a video that I have, a feeding video, and I didn't want to do feeding videos. I mean, I just don't see the point in, you know, showing. There's a million feeding videos out. Everybody knows how it happens. You know, to watch an animal give its life for another animal to be sustained, and we do it as humans, you know, but we distance ourselves. That's how we live with ourselves, and how we go through our day-to-day lives. You know, 90% of us aren't butchers. You know, we go to the store, there's a package, we buy it and we eat it, and we're not there, you know, going out into the field with all the cows that you've grown from a baby, that you have seen has call it a temperament or a personality, you know, and watch that cow have to give its life then to be turned in to sustain us. That's what we do as a human race, is distance ourselves from that aspect of it, so we don't think about it. Well, when you're hands-on with being snakes and you're feeding like that, you're right there. You're the one that's in control. You are the one, you know, basically placing that rodent and giving its life away for that snake's life. And it's the way it works. It's the way of the world, but it doesn't make it any easier, especially if you know, like animals. You can grow attached, you know, if you raise rats, or, you know, you end up, if you do live and you end up holding one back because they didn't eat, and, you know, a week goes by and you fed it, and, you know, you start to build a relationship with it, and then the next week you're supposed to throw it in a cage and let it die. I mean, it's something to definitely consider. It's not for the faint of heart, but it is part of being a snake owner. So be real. If you were not capable of that, or you don't have somebody very close to you that can, reconsider being a snake owner, because it can be part of it, and a lot of times it is. If you get a picky snake that's not feeding for some reason, it's not a husbandry issue, and it's not an issue of being in breeding season, then it might be time to try something different, whether it's live prey or different size prey, or a different type of prey, whether it be a regular rat or an ASF rat. So things to consider whenever you're doing feeding. Back to the live part of it. Like I said, frozen thawed has a lot of advantages with scheduling. Obviously with keeping, you don't have to run to the pet store. You get them in, they're frozen, they're in your freezer, you pull them out at will. Very simple process. So that's the recommended process for a lot of reasons. One, you don't have to be a part of that life-taking situation, although you are when you're buying them frozen, but you're distancing yourself again, as what we do to make it okay. But if you do have to, frozen thawed is so much easier, just a lot of ways. But again, if you have a bigger collection, as your collection grows, that's when things get interesting, because a lot of times you get different snakes that have different characteristics that may not take frozen and thawed, or may take special feeding like ASF rats. There's a big stigma out there where people are, I guess, afraid to feed ASF because the snakes get attached to them or won't feed on anything else. And there is some truth to that in my experience. I have a collection right now of just under 10 snakes, and feeding, I do use ASFs, not exclusively, but I do notice that I have a couple now that are less apt to take a regular rat versus an ASF. And I'm able to, with those snakes and having them on hand, I can put in a regular rat and watch basically no interest from the snake, remove it, and minutes later put in an ASF, and boom, watch the rat be taken. So there is some truth to that, and you have to watch, because sometimes ASFs aren't as plentiful, not as easy to get. So if you do get a snake that is on ASFs exclusively and doesn't like to feed on anything else, you need to have a supply somewhere nearby, either a breeder or some steady supply, to obviously take care of your snake, because you don't want it to be missing meals because you can't supply the proper food. So something to think about. Now, I have noticed with some of those situations, if, let's just say, I put the regular rat in and it doesn't feed, and I wait a week and place a regular rat in, then I've had them feed. So is it a situation of they're not super hungry, so they're being pickier? It's yet to be proven. I'm messing with it a little bit just to try to see, how much truth is to the ASF stigma, where once you're on ASF rats with your snakes, that you can't feed anything else, and and if you go to sell them or anything down the line and you have a problem and they're worth less money because they're on ASF. So I'm trying to disprove or check some of these theories out to see exactly how that goes. And so far, I don't have anything that won't take anything but an ASF, but I do have a couple that have been more picky week to week. If I don't put an ASF in, I might get a refusal, but maybe the next week if I put a regular rat in, I won't. So I haven't had anything 100% not take anything but ASFs yet. But again, I'm early on and I have a small collection at this point, so that's yet to be proven. But we will keep you updated on that and see what my findings are, to give you a little bit more self-assurance. If you do come across a snake that's on ASFs, how confident you would be if you don't have ASFs nearby and you want to try to switch it back just to regular rats. Is it possible? Can it be done? My thoughts are, in the most part, it can be done, but I want to prove that out before I give that advice out and have somebody have problems with getting a snake and then it not eating at all. And like I said, I haven't had that issue yet, but I'm going to keep messing around with it and see. And I think, let's just say, if you want to avoid that, and I do breed ASFs, so obviously they're more readily available to me and easier to come by, but I still try to switch it up. I'll do ASF one week and then I'll do regular another, or switch up, half and half, just because I don't want to see them become 100% dependent on them future down the road, if you know, I decide to go a different way breeding and I want to be able to sell it and you know, get average, you know, average price for the snake versus a lower dollar amount, possibly because it's specifically on ASF. So next thing to speak of is, you know, the snake's age versus feeding. Typically hatchlings and small snakes are where you're going to run into the issues with frozen thawed. That's where it seems to be the response is much greater with a live animal movement in there. Triggers their, call it, feeding responses naturally when they're young like that. And a lot of people, you know, get a hatchling and they'll start them out on, like, you know, fuzzy mice, something like that, that's moving around, and then slowly work up to like a rat crawler. And then that's when, once they get them fairly established on eating, is when they try to go frozen and thawed. There's a gentleman that is very popular on YouTube that does ball pythons, and it's Predator BP. And that guy pretty much starts everything out that he has on frozen and thawed, which is very interesting to see. I think he's onto something. He's a wealth of knowledge, and if you're not subscribed to him, you need to be, because he is probably one of the most inspiring guys in this hobby, helpful, and also is innovative in a lot of ways. And that's one thing that I'll give him, is you don't see very many breeders at all starting from scratch, you know, a first thing hatchling and getting on frozen thawed. And he seems to have kind of a few tricks to do that. And he waits them out. You know, he's not maybe as aggressive, you know, when they're first ready to feed. If they don't feed right away on the frozen thawed, you know, he'll give them another week and another week. You know, he doesn't put anything in danger as far as their health, but he's just got some interesting ways of doing it, and it's been very successful for him. So if you have any questions or want to look into that further, if you're breeding and you want to get your hatchling started right away on frozen thawed, definitely watch some of his videos, because that is pretty interesting to watch. You know, I think it's more the easier way out to start with live. If you can start with frozen and thawed from a hatchling standpoint, probably a pretty good indication that you'll be able to stay frozen and thawed that whole snake's life. So if it's never known anything other than that, you know, that probably helps. So keep that in mind, and keep his channel in mind if you're not subscribed to him, Predator BP. He's out of the UK, and he's an amazing ball python keeper, breeder, and just an amazing person overall from what I've gathered. So keep that in mind. So we've covered all that: hatchlings, live, frozen, thawed, ASFs. Okay, this is our het orange ghost, and she has been cooling, although she does seem to still be feeding. So let's see what happens here. She's on the hunt, a little bit in the wrong direction, but nonetheless on the hunt. And that's the way it goes. And we got a biter. No, maybe not. Now usually when they bite or strike, they usually go right for the front of the head, which in turn they can't bite. It's pretty interesting to see. Now this one still has this one in a good position, but yet it's not typical. Usually they go for right about the head. But yes, it is not pleasant to watch. This is part of being a snake owner. This is part of being a snake owner. Now you can do frozen and thawed, like I said. It can happen. You may get through your whole ownership of that snake without an issue, but It's not always the way it goes. So you have to be prepared to do something like this.